I want to talk about how Indians eat out and how's the fine dining space evolved. And why I want to ask that question is because I think fine dining, what it was maybe 10 years back, or what it was that we remember growing up in our teens and going out for that really special fine dining sort of a meal to a hotel, that's drastically changed, right? So,
Yep.
you want to, I think, Roshni, you would have had the most perspective on this.
What is fine dining even anymore? I mean,
Exactly.
it's kind of, I think the association with the words fine dining now, like the emotion that comes with it is boring. And I feel like fine dining sort of is, it's gone, like it's my parents' generation thing to do, right? It's not my generation thing to do. It is something that on my 7th birthday, my 8th birthday, my parents wanted to take me out for a treat. They would take me to, like maybe
Zodiac today.
Shamiana. No.
You have good parents.
Shamiana. And I mean, or they would take me to, say, for example, China Garden, which at that time was considered fine dining. I think it had just opened or something. And I remember sitting in China Garden, maybe like my 7th or 8th birthday, and like running my hands over the buttery sort of couches and thinking, my goodness, this is like so posh. But I feel like what's happened now with hotels and that like association of fine dining with hotels has become dated, has become like it's become a bit fuddy-duddy. We don't think about hotels as a place to go and eat well anymore. You just go there for like if you want to impress somebody, you want to take a client, you want to have a business meeting. They've become places of convenience. But if I want to really eat well, I'm not going to enter a 5-star hotel anymore. If I'm going to do it, also it's going to be for that like 2 or 3 dishes that I'm nostalgic about, or like maybe if I hear that something amazing's come up. Weirdly enough, if a restaurant opens outside a 5-star hotel, I'm more likely to be excited about it than inside a 5-star hotel. And I've heard of a couple of like really great restaurants opening in central Bombay, like in the Parel area, in the hotels over there. And I keep thinking I'll go there one day, but to be honest, so far that day has not come. When I think about actually going on the day, I'm like, not today, maybe next week. They've lost their sheen. They've lost their sort of like spark. They're not interesting anymore, to be honest. And with that price point, you better impress me. I mean, with like if your menu prices are like already sky high and then you're going to add taxes, like 5-star hotel taxes, 5-star hotel service charge, it's got to be something else. And I'm not finding that anymore.
There are 2 things here that I want to pick on. One is the word posh, right, that you used.
Yeah.
Again, I think for us, for our generation, posh and fine dining is not necessarily linked, right? You could
No.
be in a very comfortable environment and be fine dining. Since you worked at hotels and now you have your own restaurants, which have been on most of the well-known lists in Asia as well, what was your perspective when you started to even think of starting a restaurant? Because you would have done so much research on this, right? Like, what was the thought process there?
So, like taking from what Rosh was saying, fine dining in India is pretentious and intimidating. That's all it is, right? But actually, like fine dining is not an environment. Like, people mistaken it for environment, but should be for the quality of product and what I come there for. So when we were opening like our first restaurant, and we always say it, we've always been lucky as well for the heartwarming response we've got. But we went in saying we want to create an approachable and accessible restaurant, right? We want someone who walks in maybe wearing a suit because he has a meeting close by. But at the same time, someone walks in wearing shorts. They both feel comfortable in that space. So a lot comes in through the way you design it, but also when it comes to the food and how do you make it fun, casual, but at the same time, just because I'm not a fine dining restaurant does not mean my quality of product needs to drop. So for us, when it comes to the product itself, it's also a lot of research that goes in and making sure what we are putting on the table, may it be a drink, may it be food, may it come from the pricing, the size of the dish, the portion size. A lot of thought goes into it by seeing what is the context of India, what works here, and flavor-wise what works and what doesn't intimidate you as a person. And if you see that in Bombay Canteen's perspective, I'll give you the easiest example, is year one of Bombay Canteen, we had a dish called Arbi Tuk,
Yeah.
right? With every one of us has eaten, right? And I always tell people, like, the reason that dish worked is it has khatta, sweet, like that namkeen flavor. It's chaat basically, right? But what was great was you had crunchy textures, you had fresh rat tail radish, moogri, salsa on top of it, the chili yogurt which gave the spice, right? That dish is not on the menu anymore, but there is now a Seabass ceviche safe puri on the menu, right? When I look at it, if I put that dish on the menu 8 years ago, it wouldn't have worked, would have made us look extremely pretentious, right? But now people know what Bombay Canteen stands for, and that's how our philosophy has evolved. So it's at that time, you need the right time, right place, and thinking at that time, but evolving over time to make sure that, for me, fine dining should be fun dining instead, right? Where every food tells me a story and leaves me with a big smile on my face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think now for food to be worth the return on investment in terms of the time and money you put into that meal when you go out to eat with somebody, it has to be more interesting than it has to be fancy. I think fancy has now become kind of like a bad word. And interesting, if I don't want to go out and be impressed with a fancy meal, I want to be impressed with an interesting meal. Like, what is this meal? Do I want to have more of it when I leave? Am I feeling satisfied? And you don't really get much of that in the typical traditional way that we think of fine dining. You don't get that much anymore in the city, or I think elsewhere in the country as well.
The safe puri example you gave, I think 8 years back, if you opened Bombay Canteen with that, it also would have looked like that fusion thing for the sake
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
The only thing left would have been some dry ice
Yeah.
underneath it, and
People used to ask us, "Aap nitrogen क्यों नहीं डाल रहे हो खाने में?" It's like,
thank God the nitrogen phase is over.
you think it is? It's
dry
still,
ice.
I think it's because you don't go to those restaurants. It still exists.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of our restaurants in India are full of gas.
Uh, just ending that whole 5-star conversation, I think last couple of times I've traveled at least to Singapore and all, there is a lot of relevance at a lot of 5-star hotels. Look at something like Andaz in Singapore, Mr. Stock on the rooftop. That bar is just spectacular everywhere. Drinks, vibe,
Yeah.
decor, everything, right? And in India, whenever someone asks us, especially about Bombay, we can give an example of Bombay. Anytime someone says, where do you want to go eat? I can only think of non-fine dining,
Non-hotel.
non-5-star hotel options.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's exciting. But is this also because there's a lot more young blood in this space, a lot more chefs, entrepreneurs, and there's no bureaucracy of a F&B manager, director, purchase manager on top of all of that, right?
Yeah.
I would do a whole 2-hour podcast on this because I've lived that life. 3 years here in India. And after that as well, when I was with the hotel chain in Singapore for another 3.5 years. To answer your question, like, imagine the Manhattan bar at Regent Hotel, right? When I first heard about it in Singapore, I also couldn't believe that this can happen in a hotel, right? The bureaucracy in India is unimaginable, but the challenge is, in India, we still go to a hotel restaurant, not we. There's a certain clientele that goes to those restaurants to be seen and to be away from certain people who go to casual restaurants. And that clientele still exists. Like, if you go to one of the South Bombay restaurants, it's full for dinner. And it really, like, pisses me off because it's expensive and not great food. But people are there because their fathers went there. They struck deals there. Like, a lobby of a hotel in Bombay is where all government deals get struck, I feel. Like, you just see it happening. So it's just, from the hotel manager's point of view, he or she is thinking, why do I need to evolve if I'm still making money? If pretentious people are still coming and spending that money? Whereas I think the world over, like, even if you look at London, the kind of restaurants and bars, like the Artesian which was there, it's happened because people of all genre want to have, in the end, a quality meal. It does not depend on the environment or a hotel or a casual or a freestanding. It's just the understanding of what value is and what a quality drink and food is. And I feel that's going to happen in India only when we as people or we as start realizing that. There are a lot of young people getting into it, which is great. But also I feel a lot of them are coming in with seeing something in a Scandinavian country and being like, how do I replicate this here? Whereas thinking, okay, I learned technique and I learned something there in the context of India and its ingredients. How do I make the best experience here? So I think what you said is right, but I don't think hotels here are going to change.
I don't see hotels here change as well. I think just the point that a lot of restaurants will now try and make the ingredient the hero or the produce the hero. I don't see hotels do that.
So I'm guessing you remember, Yash. There was like the eating out was so synonymous with eating at a hotel that a lot of the small little chotu restaurants and gullies in Bombay used to call themselves hotel whatever, right? Hotel
Yeah.
Prakash, hotel whatever, right? And there was when somebody like named their restaurant hotel whatever, they automatically made it sound like we're going to give you like good food here and good service. But now, actually, I feel like the people who are going to hotels are going to hotels, like he said, because that's, I feel like, the last bastion of my bap in dining. That's the only place where people do my bap to you in dining, because now a lot of the service is not about my bap anymore. And I feel, and it's exactly this, is that the people who want to go there and get a power trip, an ego trip about like the way that they're being served and then saying, so how are you, whatever. And it's very different from the way it happens in like the more successful independent restaurants, where you will still get great service, but it won't be subservient.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's sort of the shift that's happening, which is why our generation that doesn't like that my bapness is sort of eschewing hotel restaurants. They'd rather go for like, a meal which is really fun and the server can like explain things really well to you, and it's almost like somebody, if you met them outside the restaurant, you could hang out with.
I've seen this happen sometimes, that the people who are serving you food, you also realize that these are people you could have gotten a drink with, right?
Exactly.
It's that sort of a vibe. And I'd any day prefer being addressed with my name if they know me, if I'm regular there, than being sir, right?
Yeah. A lot of like what has happened in Bombay over the last, say, 10, 12 years is that the city has become increasingly insular. So this is something that we used to talk about at Time Out, is when the mill lands went from centers of production to centers of consumption, right? This is where the city's commerce used to sort of like, where it used to, the workers used to go. And now workers can't afford a lot of the restaurants and the mills. What's happened is that the people who go to hotel restaurants or even like go to the fancier places come from a generation where they want to, everybody's very insular, right? You're living in your silos. You're getting out of your apartment. You're getting into your air-conditioned car. You're going to the mall. You go to the multiplex. You're going to the restaurant. You're going to the hotel. Very few people are engaging with the streets. And this is something that we used to bring up a lot, even when it started in 2007, 2008. It's the hotel sort of, there's a very different generation that sort of insulates themselves that way. And our generation, which still likes to engage with the city, be part of the culture, go for gigs, eat street food, art festivals, go to Kotachiwadi, things like that. And then there's a very distinct split. And I feel like that generation sort of like, way this generation's growing and that one's sort of fading away slowly. So I don't know what the future of hotel restaurants will be.